All right. Okay, so what we're going to talk about today, we're going to talk about values. We're going to talk about core values, okay? I'm going to take you guys through like a little bit of an exercise, all right? You probably have talked about core values before, right? Everybody's talked about, tried to identify them, try to really like expand on them and really get to know them because, well, we're going to talk about the power of core values and why it's so important to know where your core values are, but then also I don't feel they ever change, but they are something that we can get better at communicating and understanding and diving in deeper, which is what we're going to do today. So we're going to do a mixture of a workshop where I'm going to take you through, ask you some different questions. We're going to pull out the best of the past and the best of the future to find and identify some of your core values. And then from there, you're going to do some brainstorming. I'm going to have you write out your core value statements. And then you're going to go into like little mini breakout rooms. You're going to be able to communicate with each other and level it up. And then we're going to come back at the end and we're going to hear everybody's core value statement. Okay. Now, for those of you guys who have gone through core values, there's many different ways to do it, right? Like the first time that I ever did it was like, hey, here's a page of 100 words and just like circle the ones that feel most connected to you and cross out the other ones. And then I went through it and it's like, okay, now scratch out more of them until you get down to 3. And I never found that to be helpful. And that's why when people would tell me about core values, I'm like, it's not really something that I'm interested in because like it's never really helped in the past, right? And so by doing that, what I realized is I was like circling the ones that I wanted to be my values, not what was intrinsically inside, right? So when we think about values and our core values, it's not something that comes from the outside world. It's something that comes from the inside world, right? So if we're looking on the outside for our values, we have to first start and look internally and see what's like really near and dear to us, which I'll help you guys with today. And then from there, yes, we want to look on the outside to see if we can like connect with people who share our similar values, who share our similar, like the impact we want to make or the integrity we want to live with, all those kind of things, because that helps us to continue to live in like alignment with our core values. All right. So we're going to go through that. But I do want to ask you guys first off, like when you think about core values and you think about how having and identifying core values can help you, what kind of comes into mind in terms of like, what do you think would be helpful? What kind of impact would identifying and living within your core values do for you? Not only as an entrepreneur, not only on social media, which by the way, we'll talk about that today, how core values should be all over your social media so people know who you are, that know, like, and trust factor, which is also why we don't want to try and be like somebody else, because if we try to be like somebody else and we like we'll feel inauthentic, that's because our core values are out of alignment. But what are some things you guys can think of that would be beneficial for identifying and living within your core values? Have you ever got to your end of the day and you're like, I did a whole bunch of stuff, but I just feel like anxiety, like I wasn't following and taking the right actions, or I just did a whole bunch of stuff and I didn't like actually get anything done, right? Because the productive and busy kind of like things goes back and forth. But a lot of times when I identified, it's like, oh, I was kind of living outside of my values, or I was living into one value and I forgot all the rest of them. And when I live in this synergy of all of them, because it's just like this, like I know a lot of you guys are family oriented, right? And you know that I'm family oriented too, right? And so when you think about family and you think about business, like you're going to want to like, but I want to spend a lot of time with my family, but I'm also want to do a lot over here in my business. And I also want to make an impact over here. And I also want to do this. And it's like finding that happy, like harmony that Josh talks about, right? It's like that middle ground. That's really where it is, where it's going to feel like still a little bit of like, but I want to be able to spend more time over here or over here. That's the pull of the different values. But if you like, let's say, oh, hey, I'm just going to dedicate all today to my business and you don't do any of those other values, that's where you kind of get to the end of the day. And I know for me, I start to feel that anxiety of like, I move forward in here, but I like literally move back in all of these other ones. And that like tug is one of the reasons why I want to identify core values. It helps us with a filter, right? It helps us filter, should I do this or find another ground to do it in? Where should I be spending my time? It's kind of like that universal filter that you can flow things through. And it's really good at helping you make decisions, right? Because if you've ever been in the confusion land and you don't have like anything to filter through, that's where you're like, I just don't know what to do next. And if you understand your core values, you know that there's like, it doesn't mean the next step you're going to take is going to be the right one, but you know that it's in alignment with your values and your intention of it is, hey, this is the impact that I want to make in this specific area. And even if it doesn't go well, now you can still say, but I lived within my values. I'm just going to do it a little differently next time, right? So yes, having that filter will make decisions easier and will make your time and how you can fluctuate between all that easier. Because with clarity, we just start taking steps, right? And it's when that confusion or the overwhelm that comes in here, the head voice, that's what will prevent us from taking that step. And when you're clear with the values, you will get in and take more action. So if you're taking action outside of your core values, you'll feel that it's misaligned actions. It's like, I'm just doing this, right? It's like, I just got to send these messages, because you're feeling, you don't know why a lot of the times. It's like hidden, but you're like, I just don't feel right about this part. And so you're going to start taking misaligned or unaligned actions. And when you're living within your core values, it feels more aligned. So you can do the same thing. You can take the same amount of time, but you can make more impact when you're, obviously having that energy that's actually fueling you to get after it, versus feeling like you're just trying to do this thing because somebody told you to do it, or you're just trying to do this because you saw somebody else do it, right? And that's where you can kind of get weird, because you get off of base from your core values, right? And it's just a matter of like getting back into that middle ground. And it's not like you're always going to live in your core values. I always want to bring that up too, right? Like, it's the same with like head versus heart, right? I teach a certification, and I still struggle with this, with like parenting, with just everything, right? And we're all human. We all have a human brain. So we're going to experience these times where we're out of alignment with our core values. But if we've taken time to identify them, then we can go, okay, what do I have to do? Let me read them, right? Kind of like my affirmations. Let me just get this center. This is the direction that I'm going for today. These are like my 3-4 values, whatever that is that I want to lean into. And it helps you get like back on track, not because you should beat yourself up when you get off, but it's the indicator of like, oh, hey, maybe we should look at these a little differently, right? Use them as intel to evolve, not intel to beat yourself up for, which is what a lot of people do. They find it, oh man, I didn't live into my values and make this decision. I'm like, welcome to being a human being, because we do that, right? We react out of emotion sometimes, and it's never a good thing to go back and beat ourselves up from it. Instead, we can go, you know what? Let me revisit my core values and get back on track, right? And when you have something like that, you can get back on track real quick. Okay, so a couple things. Number one is when it comes to your values, as a leader, we put out our values, right? And we're kind of like unmoved by the opinions of others. Now you're going to see like different leaders have different values. Does that make one leader's values bad and somebody else is good? No, it's just their core values, right? So we don't want to ever minimize other people and their values, right? We don't want to think our values are better than somebody else's. They're just our values, right? But as I like to term it as a modern leader, it's the name of my YouTube channel. It's like, as a modern leader, we have to still go out there and we have to put our flag in the ground. And this is what my values are. I love you if you want to follow these values or not, but I also love you if you don't like these values, because I also want to attract people who have the same values and push people away that don't, all right? So one of the things that I talk a lot about on my channel is impact over income. And it's not that there's a right or wrong answer there. It's just my values are impact. It's like, how many people can I actually help? Do I want to make money? Yes, I want to make money. But I lead with impact because that for me is what feels most authentic, because I want to make a huge impact in the world. And there's other people who lead with, I want to make as much money as possible. Now, Kurt and I have found this out. I make a YouTube video, same exact YouTube video. One is how to make a huge impact in the world. And the other one is how to make $1 million in 30 days. Whoever is attracted to that message is going to be when they have that value, right? So if it's like, how do I make $1 million? I mean, I don't know. Do you guys click on those videos? How to make $1 million in 30 days? Or do you click on the, hey, how to make a big impact in the world, or how to make an impact while making some money? So every single one of those attracts a different level of person. Not that they're right or wrong, but they all have their own values, right? So I'm not saying that somebody who's not wanting to lean into impact, there's something wrong with that, right? Because there's a lot of people like Grant Cardone making as much money as possible, 10x, right? Are people going to come to him and say, hey, I think you should slow down? He's going to be like, yeah, you're right. I should probably slow down, and I should be like a 2x, not a 10x, right? He's like, screw you, I'm going to do whatever I want, right? Because he's planting his flag in the ground, and he's saying, these are my values. This is really what I believe in. Not that what you believe in is wrong, because I'm open to seeing that, but this is truly what I believe in, right? And as you continue to develop these, you'll be able to have a better understanding of your values and better able to explain it and explore it, all right? Now, we've already talked about this, but your core values give you a true north. It's like this one place that you can always come back to and go, okay, this is going to be able to be my true north again, all right? So whenever you have that confusion moment, whenever you have that, I just don't know what to do, like Elizabeth said, I don't know what decision to make, boom, you can come back to your core values and say, what does my core values tell me to do, all right? Number two is they show people what you stand for. They show people what you stand for. One of the most important things when it comes to social media is to get people to see what you stand for and what you don't stand for. I don't want to say it's this idea of being vanilla, but trying to please everyone is the good way of pleasing no one, right? Because nobody knows what you stand for. If you see somebody on social media and you don't know which part they stand for, are they this or are they that, your chances of being influenced with them are less, right? But if you know what they stand for, what happens? Like if you stand for that same thing, you're like, oh, I would follow that person anywhere, right? I mean, just an example is Josh. When you see Josh, when he's on a webinar, when he's having a video, whatever, you don't realize this, but you're automatically thinking about, okay, what are his values? And is his values in alignment with me? And if they are, okay, then I'm up for him being my leader. But if they're not, hey, I'm going to keep looking and I'm going to keep like looking for somebody else who will have those values, right? You don't realize that, but it's actually happening on a webinar. It's actually happening when he's dropping hints about Jenny or his kids or like whatever he's talking about, his church life. You know why he talks about that? Because there's a lot of people out there who feel like him, right? He talks about being a failed rock star. Do you know why he talks about that? Because there's a lot of people who are out there who are like, have experienced failure, whether it's a rock star or not. And so he's doing that because he wants you to see what his values are so that you can connect with him. But if he would have kept all those stories, kept all of him like secret, and then just tried to like be the influencer on social media, just like talking and not explaining like some of those different things, we wouldn't know what he stands for. So we wouldn't be willing to get behind him, right? So when we talk about like core values, when we talk about leadership, it's about like leaning into what your values are, not poo-pooing anybody else, but knowing that people are going to love you and some people are not going to love you. And that's a part of it, right? That means sometimes it can be a little bit polarizing as opposed to just trying to please everyone, because then nobody knows what you really stand for, all right? Now, there's two other things that I want to talk about. And this is something that I talk a lot about at all of our different retreats is like, I love that you guys like are using this to figure out what your core values are and to really dive deep into it and how this applies to you. But I also want you to think that this also applies to the people that you lead, including kids, including your customers, your clients, your coaches, anybody that you have contact with. Like you've got to realize that they have values that are a little bit different than yours too, right? So yes, like doing this exercise that we're going to take you through in a minute is going to help you identify your core values. But I also want to make sure that you can do that for other people too, all right? So make sure that if you get to that point where you're like, you know what, maybe we should do a core values exercise with one of my clients, please do that. I mean, even reach out to me. I'll literally give you what it is that I have here, because it's not just seeing this through the lens of, hey, how does this apply to me? It's also like, how does this apply to the people that I lead, right? It's the same with coaching. Now that you understand how to self-coach, what does that do? It gives you a great ability of coaching other people, right? And teaching them the push method and teaching them about these different skills, right? And by doing that, we empower them and then they can go off and do it again. But it's really not just about how do I see this through my lens, but also how do I see it through the lens of a leader and the people that I'm leading to. Even just the first time maybe you saw Josh or the first time you saw me, what was it about that caused you to feel like, okay, this is something I want to do. This is an action that I want to take. I want to join this program. And I want you to think about this like on a little bit of a deeper level now that you understand that when we lead with specific things, when you hear things from us, it either connects you or it like pushes you away. But obviously you guys wouldn't be here if it had pushed you away, right? So what are some of the things, just think about it, what are some of the things that you either saw through our message or through a conversation that you had that attracted you to want to take that next step? It's a tough question, right? And it's something that I all want you guys to think about because you've experienced it yourself, but we haven't slowed down for enough to actually understand why our subconscious mind said, oh, hey, these are the right guys for me. Because you guys have seen, there's a ton of life coach schools. There's a ton of different things that are out there, right? But there was something that attracted you and made you feel like, hey, these are my people. And it's not just because we teach you 6 months to six figures. It's not just because we teach you head versus heart. Those are the logical things that your brain goes, oh, let me now look on the outside and do my bias of like, I really like these guys or I want to take this action. Let me list all the reasons why this is good, right? Oh, because they're trying to do this, they're about family or whatever. But like when you actually get to the root of that, asking yourself like, why? What made me feel like, okay, these guys could help me, right? Maybe it was that hint of belief or hope. Or maybe it was one of our stories or just a different thing that really connected. Maybe it's authenticity. You're like, you know what? Like he's going to talk about inappropriate things sometimes because that's just the way that he is. And he's not going to necessarily filter himself because he wants to show you guys he's the real him, right? And maybe I know for me, that was it. It's like, you know, he's the real him, but he also has this deep like heart that's like, hey, he wants to make an impact in people's lives and he'll do whatever it takes. He'll share whatever and he won't hold anything back, right? And I do feel like when he says he loves everybody, he really does, like even haters. Like, and I can feel that's in his core value and it's something that I want to get behind, right? So when we think about that, like it's good to identify it from the outside and how you've been affected because it's also happening to you guys. Like, you might think that you're just posting on social media, you're doing a podcast, you're doing a video, but believe it or not, people are unconsciously having this conversation with themselves. Should I continue to read Trisha's posts? Should I continue to like be a part of this and watch these videos and be a part of the community? Believe it or not, our subconscious mind is always working, right? It's always like, oh, this is the reason why I should be here, right? And as we continue to take those steps, guess what? It makes us even want to take more steps and more steps and more steps, right? But identifying, like, why is that, right? Not because I don't want you guys to be here, because I do, but I want you to identify it to go, oh, wow, this is actually happening to me too, right? And it's not as complicated as you think either. It's happening already. It's like the push method, right? It's like, oh, we didn't just like invent the push method and say, oh, now it's happening. It's always been happening since you were born. Like, it literally was happening all the time. It's just now we're bringing awareness to it, right? So I don't want you to also use this to be like, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to overthink what it is that I'm posting. I'm going to be like, no, is it within your core values? Then perfect. Then it's perfectly where it is. It's also where when some people are like, I'm just posting about business, right? They're like, all I'm doing is posting about this. I'm like, well, how do you feel about that? And they're like, well, I feel like people don't get to know me, right? And that's why taking them through the core values really does help, because they're like, oh, wow, I have these 3 or 4 core values. What if I just like on Monday, I did this core value, Tuesday, I did this core value. And I'm like, yeah, you could do that, or you can mix them all together. It's like, but it is going to give you some like ideas of, hey, when it is time to post, what do I want to post about today? Maybe I'm just going to post about family. Maybe I'm just going to post about impact or integrity or whatever, right? And it's people getting to know you through that process, not in one post, but it's the totality of your message, is like what Josh says, okay? So I want you guys to like actually think on that. I know it's kind of a hard question, and I kind of put you on the spot because it's one of those things where it's like, I never even knew that happened. And now your brain's going, what was it? Like, what happened? Like, when was the first time that I saw them and they gave a speech, or they, had the power of I am? Like, what was it that attracted me, right? Because I got to tell you guys, there's a lot of things that repel people from what we do too, right? There's things that we lead with and we purposefully repel, because we don't want to actually, believe it or not, we don't want to have every client and customer in the world, right? You guys have all had that, right? Where you've connected with somebody and you're like, oh my God, I need this person to sign up. And they sign up and you're like, oh my God, why did I actually get them and convince them to do this, right? It's such a pull on my energy, right? And a lot of times it's because they're out of alignment with your core values. Their values aren't necessarily the same as yours. And it kind of feels like you have to be somebody else on the call. And I don't want to do that. I don't want you guys to have to do that. I want you to be able to be yourselves on the call, and do so like in a way that feels good to you, right?